Okay.
Welcome everybody. This is Aliyah Mohyeddin. I'm an NLP master trainer working in Pakistan at the moment. And in part of these Facebook Lives that I run, I'm very excited today to have Vasily Zafiris from the Netherlands. Apologies, Vasily, if I said it incorrectly, I'll ask you to, I did practice it. Vasily is here joining us from the Netherlands, and I met him a couple of months ago, actually, probably in June or something, and at an NLP health conference hosted by NLP Greece. And Vasily was talking about depression, which was really, really interesting. And just to give you a little bit of background on Vasily, Vasily is a master trainer in NLP. He's a coach, a researcher, he's an author, public speaker, and he's done a lot of research on depression and authored a book called Happiness is Depressing, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about. Sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, the happiness being depressing, but you also teach leadership at the, please correct me if I'm wrong, Nyan Road.
Yes, correct.
University in the Netherlands, and the ambassador for the Society of Mental Space Psychology.
Yes.
Welcome, Vasily. I'm so excited to have you on this Facebook Live.
Well, thank you. I'm excited as well. Yeah. It's one little thing. I think I hear some sound, the same sound. Is that because you hear the sound from some other source? Because I hear
it. I'm actually a little bit confused because for the first time I'm having the echo happening as we are speaking. So I'm recording this anyway. So I've got it on Facebook Live. I've turned the volume down on my Facebook Live. So hopefully everybody can hear it. I've got it here as well. So as people start coming on, we'll have people coming on. There are already a few people.
All right.
I will
That's a suggestion.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you have your Facebook on the computer on, so we get that sound extra. You understand what I'm saying?
It is on the computer, but if I turn it on the computer, then it'll disconnect, I think.
So I was just thinking maybe you have the Facebook Live on Facebook on, so we get it not just in Zoom but also in Facebook. You understand what I'm saying?
It is on Facebook. Yeah, it is on. It's going live. It's live streaming on Facebook.
Yeah, but maybe that's probably what we hear. We hear the second echo.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's very small. So if the sound is low, then it's not going to be any issue.
Yeah. So there are people already coming on, and I've just sent a message to confirm that they can hear us. But I think we're good to go.
Yes.
So I thought, Vasily, thank you so much for joining me, and see what people are saying. Whenever you see me looking down, I'm actually watching what the response is, people coming on, and people who are listening to us. Please, if you've got anything you want to share in terms of comments, or also if you have questions, please do share. You know, we'd love to sort of engage in the conversation with everybody. So, and Vasily would love to answer your questions too.
Yeah.
I've had a few amazing conversations with Vasily about depression and the aspects around depression, and so you're a font of information, and it's considering it's such a dark subject. Speaking to you about it, Vasily, it's so interesting, and it opens up, for me anyway, it opens up hope. It opens up the possibility of that's not something we need to just stay with, that it's something that we do have potentially, I don't know if the right word to say is power over it, or just we have choice. And I think that's what, speaking with you gave me, that sense that there's choice involved and there's some sort of personal power involved. But, I think talking about depression in the day and age we're living in with COVID, it's been like going on to 2 years now with COVID, and we're now into the Delta strain. There's emotional exhaustion happening. People have suffered not just with the virus, but with the fallout of isolation, loneliness, loss of income. Businesses have collapsed. So depression is a very topical subject. People are feeling it in various forms.
Yeah.
I was going through some of the notes that from your masterclass on depression, and one of the things you said in it, and I sort of noticed, I sort of wrote it down, was depression is called the flu of the 21st century.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I thought, what an interesting and strong statement. And 1 in 5 people have experienced depression at some point in their lives. Exactly. And in fact, depression is one of the leading causes of death in adolescents from around the world. So it's something that is really topical and something that is really present in all our lives, doesn't matter where we live.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because
go
well,
ahead.
it's interesting you say, because it's like present overall actually, but it's very very little talked about.
Very little talked about.
And that's really interesting, because you mentioned something really interesting just just a minute ago, because this is such a dark topic, you said, so this dark topic, which I think it really is actually, from the color perspective, but this dark topic is actually, for most people, a very fearful topic.
Yeah.
So people tend to stay away. Even a person who experiences depression, many people who experience depression find it a big taboo to even think about it or talk about it, because there's so much stigma around it, because it means you're ill, it means weak. It means that it will never go away, because that's the general assumption. Once you've had it, it's like herpes. So you have it on your lip, it will come back forever. There's no treatment, So all these things, they create a future perspective that's not very helpful. And and one of the things that I actually really learned is that from the perspective of depression, you can actually learn a lot about what happiness actually is. And so I've gained the attitude of embracing things that are really difficult, even the most difficult things. Yeah.
In what way? Give me. In what way do you mean that? I mean, give me more information.
Yeah. Well, anything that that we might experience as dark or difficult could actually be the source of what we actually really need. Yeah. Yeah. So we're not in this darkness for no reason. There is a logic behind it, even though it's a psychologic and not a logic related to what we can understand. But there is very often a logic behind it. Yeah. Yeah.
I often, in my trainings, I often say that the curveballs in our lives are moments of challenge, which we actually fear, are actually gifts from the universe, because they're moments of growth. Yeah. And the thing is, we've been lulled into a global mindset that we need to be comfortable, we need to be happy and comfortable all the time. Exactly. That life should just go on easily, and that's never been the case. No. We are meant to feel all of our emotions, and challenges are part of the human experience, our evolutionary experience. But there's this, as I'm saying, it's a taboo of something, feeling depressed, or feeling any of these negative emotions, as if somehow it goes against the strength of our character, or a sense of it becomes an identity concept.
Exactly. Well, it's I have the book here. It's called "Happiness is Depressing," and and so and what you're saying is so true. I mean, and it's not just that it's that dark thoughts or feelings are taboo or just difficult to be around with for people, but it's also something that's related to our longing. We actually all long for the light, but it doesn't mean that we're going to get there. And so this continuous longing that we have is actually sometimes, and maybe more often than once, actually the source of a very dark experience that somebody really has deep inside. So we tend to move away from what we experience. So if you want to go for this happiness longing, just yesterday I worked with a client, a lady, and she has some serious depression problems for a very long time. and she was diagnosed clinically depressed, which basically means that she fits 5 out of 7 criteria for just being depressed. It doesn't mean that she cries all the time. It means that she has, like, things are meaningless, and she has bad sleep, she can't sleep, and and some other criteria. And in the middle of our conversation, we worked 2 or 3 times, I think 2, and then she suddenly said, "Well, what the thing is, I just want to be happy." And that's such a typical remark for people. And they don't even know what they're actually saying, because if you just want to be happy, when you delve into the meaning of those words, when you analyze them, you say, well, to just be happy means that you want to be, as a matter of fact, in a constant state of contentment. And when you think about it, even though you just say it just conversationally, I just want to be happy, you're actually giving yourself a goal that is in and by itself unachievable. Because there's no matter of fact state of anything in our life, let alone contentment. Man, if you would know how often I'm not content, but it doesn't mean I'm depressed, So to strive for this continuous state of contentment, as if that's the light that we need to strive for, that is an illusion that most of us have gotten caught up in. And it's actually,
it's a setup for failure, actually, I see it as.
Exactly.
Because it's impossible to achieve.
You can never achieve it.
Yeah.
So if you have depressed feelings mainly, later on in my research, the last couple of years, I'm going away from depressive thoughts, because thoughts are less important than feelings, in my experience, especially with depression. So when you tend towards depressed feelings, the whole idea of happiness and not being able to achieve it actually intensifies those feelings. And what it actually intensifies is actually the hopelessness that's actually ingrained in those feelings. Because basically, when you're in a depressed state, when you have feelings of depression, when you really have them, you're like, I can never get out of this, and nobody actually can help me.
Yeah. So just taking a step back, and it was interesting what you said about in depressive states, our thoughts are not as important as our feelings.
Yes.
Because in a way, our thoughts also trigger feelings. But also taking a step back from that, the 2 things that sort of struck me is the definition of saying our depressive states. Because, when we say we have depression, it becomes such an overarching, it covers everything. It becomes our entirety. We're unable to recognize moments when we're not feeling those other moments.
Exactly.
And it's sort of like when we just want to be happy, or we want happiness, but we also only experience depression as if that's it, and we delete all the other states we might be feeling in between and forget that we're actually experiencing them.
Yes.
Now, one of our earlier conversations, we're talking about this concept of clinical depression.
Yeah.
And what that means versus depression.
Yes. Well, this, again, 1 in 5 people are currently depressed or have been going through a depressive episode. When I did my research previously, a couple of years ago, the WHO calculated that 340 million people right at that moment in time were going through a depression. But actually, that number has gone up. It's 370 million right now, and it's increasing. And there's a lot of talk about why is that happening. And one of the things is what I find interesting, the difference between, let's say, depression and clinical depression. A clinical depression means nothing more and nothing less than you fit within 5 of let's say 7 criteria that were established in the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual for Psychiatric Disorders, which basically are symptoms we all know. You feel meaningless, you lose weight or you gain weight, you can't sleep, you might have thoughts of you don't like life anymore. So clinical depression is actually, you go to the doctor and you say, well, listen, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, I'm feeling that. And then the doctor says, well, you fit 5 out of 7 criteria, which means that you're clinically depressed. But other than that, it doesn't mean anything else. You know, one of the thing is, one of the interesting thing, and it has to last for 2 weeks or longer. That's an important criteria. So one of the interesting things is that you know, with depression, when you hear that it's somebody's clinically depressed, and oh my goodness, you know, a doctor's been at your bed, and you know something, and you know, if you're really like on the extreme, yeah. But if you're really on the extreme, like you have suicidal thoughts, and you know you want to jump off a bridge, then it's really good that there's a doctor at your bed and saying you need some help, maybe you need some medication to actually get you through this period.
Yeah.
But you know, in most other instances, I would say that if you, let's say, a lower in intensity, but still fit the criteria for clinical depression, when you think about it, the idea of a clinical depression suggests that there's a disease going on.
That's right, yeah.
And because we go to a doctor, the only thing a doctor can diagnose is a disease or something like that. Yeah. So a doctor will not figure out what you were doing in your daily life. He will figure out is there something in your physiology that's wrong, or is there something that we can repair, like put together or even take away, you know. So and that whole notion started from the 50s when, you know, when we were diagnosed from a psychiatric perspective with our mental illnesses. Yeah. But the interesting thing about it, and that's what most people never think about, is like when you go to a doctor and the doctor says you're clinically depressed. I have never met, and I meet quite a few depressed people, I can tell you, I have never met a depressed person who actually had their blood taken to figure out if there's any disturbance in the serotonin or the noradrenaline or the acetylcholine, all these substances which are claimed to be the cause of the disease.
Yeah.
But nobody has ever taken their blood. But just imagine, you go to the doctor, you've got a tummy ache, and the doctor says, well, you know, I think it's clinical cholera. You know, and so, well, you know, we have to figure it out. Take my blood, doctor, because I need the right prescription. I need the exact prescription. Yeah. So there's a kind of a misleading thing going on with our clinical depression diagnosis, is that we think that it's actually a medical diagnosis, but actually a symptomatic diagnosis. Yeah. So that's really important to understand. And then we have like what you would call everyday depression, you know, when a person says, I feel depressed. But that could also mean that the person is actually clinically depressed, but doesn't know it. You know?
Yeah.
Or he could just have somber thoughts and feelings that are recurring.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, they can also be like, there's a whole criteria of what represents clinical depression. There are like 7 categories. And like you're saying, having it for 2 weeks. Now, people can be in a state of feeling negative, feeling what could be identified as depressed states.
Yeah.
It can also be because of stuff that's going on. And like you were saying that, you know, it's, if you are, God forbid, suicidal, or, you know, you're at that extreme where there is risk of self-harm or harm to others, versus being in an uncomfortable space where we don't necessarily need medication. But the moment we say, okay, clinical, that's it. We've also taken on that identity and we've made it semi-permanent, if not permanent. Exactly. I have clinical depression. I've been diagnosed, and I have by the doctor, and I have clinical depression, and now everything goes. Everything gets viewed and experienced and justified through that filter. I love the example you gave of, you know, somebody has run up a few flights of stairs, and they have high blood pressure, and their blood pressure is raised.
Yeah.
Now, if you check the blood pressure at that point, it's like, well, you know, what are you can do a whole lot of, and I let you just give that description a bit better than I can, but you use those other reasons.
Yeah, let me explain. Well, the thing about it is one of the things that I started to research, and I described it in my book, which is actually a step-by-step explanation of what is depression actually and what can you do about it step by step. So, but the thing, one of the things that I found interesting is like one of the first steps in my research was, so I got a depressed client.
Mm.
I was already quite experienced as a coach and therapist for many years. So I got a depressed client. It was like, okay, so what are we going to do? You know, and I was like, you know, and with NLP, you got to go, okay, we need to set goals. That's really important. So I had
set goals, take action. Come from Physiology of Depression.
And I had a very compliant client, actually a really nice guy. I still I'm in contact with him after these many years. And so we started to set goals, and he was very compliant. He said, yeah, I'm going to do that thing, blah, blah. And so he walked away, and 2 weeks later, he came to my practice, had a face like this, and I said, so how did you do? He said, well, I didn't do anything. And I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, so, because I didn't know what was going on with him. I thought, what's going on? What kind of symptoms does he have? And so we were talking and talking. So we set some other goal, and the same thing happened. And after the third time, I got kind of confused and curious at the same time. I was like, okay, what's going on with this guy? So at a certain stage, we were sitting down, and I said to myself, okay, listen, I have to start from scratch here. And I said, what are all your symptoms? And a whole list of symptoms he came up with. I wrote down. I was like, and there was a lot of things that I didn't know what I was doing actually, but I was just figuring out how can I reach him. And so I said to him, after this list was finished, I read the whole list, and I said to him, so tell me, if your best friend would come to you and have all these symptoms, what would you think that's going on with this guy? And he looked at me and he went like, holy cow, I'm depressed. And he instantly started to cry. And it struck me as well. I was like, oh my goodness, this is actually a depression. So then my question was, what should I do? So I'm going to spare you all the details, but I'm telling the story for a particular reason. One of the things that came up to my, let's say, solution-focused mind was, what is the goal? And I was like, okay, when you're depressed, what's the goal? So I called my doctor, I called my psychiatry friends, I called my colleagues, I started to read books. I was like, nobody knew the goal. One person said, well, you go walking. The first person said, no, you take medicine. No, that's not a goal. That can't be a goal.
And even walking is not a goal, it's a process.
Exactly. So everybody, and I had training rooms filled with experienced therapists. And I asked them, what's your goal? Everybody had their own, yeah. And then they looked at each other and were like, we all have different goals. So how is that possible? And then just for the fun of it, I Googled, what's the opposite of depression? And there was no answer. Well, there was an answer, but it's another mental illness, actually. And then I realized, I was like, what if people who suffer from depression have no way out of their darkness because they don't have a clue where they need to go? And that's what triggered me in my research for assumptions. I was like, so what am I assuming about depression, actually? What are all the people around me assuming? I'm assuming that there's a way out of something, but I don't know the outcome. So that set me on the pathway to actually figure out what assumptions we make about depression. And first I figured them out. And then I started to question them. I was like, okay, so what are the assumption is that depression is an illness? If you ask anybody, that in essence, that's an assumption. And I was like, is that true? So then I was like, okay, so this is a state that a person is in, a very dark state, a very heavy state. But now to come back to your example of the stairs. So if you look at it from a medical perspective, the assumption is it's an illness, and the cause of the illness, which is the second assumption, is in the brain. Which means there is some imbalance in hormones and stuff, and that causes your state, period. So the intervention, naturally, because we cannot operate, has to be something that does something with the imbalance, yeah? And that should actually change the state. However, there's a lot of evidence that that doesn't work so simply as it's stated. So coming back to the example of running up the stairs. So let's say I would run up the stairs. Obviously, my blood pressure goes up, my heart rate goes up, my blood vessels contract because the blood has to go to my brain and my heart and my muscles. And the interesting thing is, we can ask ourselves, no, that's because of the hormones in our brain. But actually, I changed something in my behavior. I started to run up the stairs. So then I could say, no, the cause is my behavior. So the thing is, suddenly we are wondering at what's the cause of something. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing that I think that's actually been taken out of the medical explanation of depression is that we as human beings, we respond to ourselves as well as our context. This is our family, our life, the things that happen to our lives. But the way we respond is very individual. And the way that we respond, what actually determines which hormones are triggered or not, is the meaning we attribute to something. So let's say if I would run up the stairs and my heart goes crazy, but that's the adjustment of my heart, and I give it the meaning I'm dying, then I might get a panic attack. And obviously there are hormones required to get a panic attack. Yeah. There's a lot more required, but there's also hormones required. Yeah.
And as you're having that state, you're going to be releasing even more hormones.
Exactly. But if I run up the stairs and my heart goes crazy and I say, yeah, I'm really fit, then different hormones are produced.
Yeah.
So it's actually a little bit more complicated than just saying, okay, we have the cause, that's it, and from that cause we can do an intervention. So as I started to work on those assumptions, I realized, so what could be the cause then? If the cause is not just physiology, physiology is definitely involved because all our states are, are influenced by our physiology, so also our hormones in our brains. But if that's not the cause, then what could be the cause? And then I started interviewing all my clients. I actually, when I gave teachings, NLP teachings or anything else, I would ask the whole room at the end of the training, so is anybody in for some fun tonight, for some extra learning? Well, 80% of the people say, yeah, they didn't know what they were getting into. So what happened is that, that evening after dinner, the people would come back and really excited. Oh, we learned so much today. Vasily's going to really, give us some extra motivation. And then said, well, I want you to get into your depressed state. and they went, okay. And I gave everybody assignments to figure out, not just so simply as I put it now, but to find out what the causes are. And I did it with hundreds of people. And after that, I collected all those data. And to my surprise, there were basically 3 causes that everybody in those rooms experienced.
Which
well, the first cause, which is a really strong one, it's loneliness, but we can understand that. But this is not loneliness as we know it. This is the experience of loneliness, even if you are with loved ones. So you can be in a crowded room with everybody who loves you, and in your inner landscape, you can feel completely isolated, as if everybody is far away. So this does not say anything about the actual situation. It says something about the inner landscape experience that the person has. So these two not necessarily are connected to each other, the inner landscape experience and what's going on in what I call the outer landscape experience. So this is the sense of loneliness, and most people I interviewed or I collected data from have already experienced that loneliness from a younger age. So this is something that sense of loneliness that not consciously, but when they think about it, oh yeah, I used to have that kind of loneliness already when I was younger, that I didn't belong, that people weren't close or something like that. So that's one cause, this inner experience of loneliness. The second one is a really specific one, which I find fascinating to this day. The second one is a sudden change of identity. And I say these words very consciously because this is not just a change of identity. Our sense of identity changes through time, very incrementally. We hardly notice it. But with depression, I notice that people's sense of identity changes suddenly. Let me give you an example. I was working with a professional athlete, a woman, and she had been really successful in her career. And I met her about a year or 6, 7 later after she finished her career. And she came to me and she basically said, well, I really feel down and I hear you can do a lot with depression and you're really effective and I needed to talk to somebody. So I just had a general talk with her as I always do, like get some kind of an understanding of what's going on in this inner landscape of the person. And then suddenly in the middle of this conversation, as I was asking about her identity and self-image, in the middle of this conversation, she looked down, pointed at her knee, and she says, "This is not me." And it was fascinating because I already knew that she had to quit her career because of the injury in her knee. And you got to imagine, her identity is actually, I am an athlete. And so she broke her knee somehow, and it was so bad that she couldn't do her sports anymore. And then suddenly, in the middle of the conversation, she says, well, this is not me. So what I mean with a sudden change of identity is that there's a sudden awareness of who I perceive myself to be and who I have become. And that actually fractures something inside a person. It's like, I'm always this fit person and I look in the mirror and I suddenly see this fat guy. And you go like, this is not me. I am this fit person. What happened? And so there can a fracture can actually happen in the sense of self. And the last cause, is chronic, actual or perceived setback. And I say it very specifically. So it's not just one sense of setback, like somebody steals your wallet or something, or you lose your job or something. No, it's the chronic sense of setback. But the interesting thing is the setback does not have to happen in real time. It does not have to be true. It can also be perceived setback. So like, for example, let's say somebody would be waiting in line at the cash register of the supermarket. And you're waiting because you're a good citizen and you're waiting your turn. And then suddenly somebody skips the line, goes in front of you. And says, I'm in a hurry, but, and you feel that you need to step up for yourself, but you don't. You kind of go, oh my God, this always happens to me.
Yeah.
So, or if you're in the road, you're driving and somebody cuts you off, and you're like, why are they on to me? So that is not a real setback, but it's definitely the perception of setback. So it's my experience that in order to start to develop depressed feelings, you need at least 2 of these causes. The inner experience of loneliness plus a sudden shift of identity, or chronic setback, or either of these mixtures. Loneliness is almost always a part of this mixture.
Yeah.
And all of these
internal state of feeling lonely might be, like you said, have people around, but that internal feeling of being perceived as lonely. Yeah.
Well, actually, it comes back to what I said at the beginning when I say, well, feelings are more important than thoughts with depression, and I think with most problems, but with depression definitely, because it all comes down to what the person experiences. And when these 3 causes merge, then this sudden shift starts to happen where a new, let's say I would call it a gestalt emerges. A dark state where actually a person literally on the inside experiences darkness. And I find that a fascinating thing when you start talking with depressed people, because they will actually give that back to you in their language.
Yeah.
It's just dark and gray, and I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's like I'm in a black hole. But actually, it's my belief right now that those are not just words; they are actual inner landscape experiences.
Absolutely. It's a linguistic representation of how they're experiencing their inner landscape, as you call it. Really, really well said. Yeah. Tell me another thing. Well, there are a whole bunch of questions that are sort of coming up in my mind, and one of them is this sense of the physiological influence on our emotions. So our physiology influences our psychology as much as psychology influences our physiology. So just how we also, when we are also maybe explaining to people, some people listening might not know what you meant by creating a gestalt, and so how we actually run a strategy of depression.
To become depressed, you mean?
Yeah, or just that overall sense of, when the gestalt is there.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, when you think of the whole idea of a gestalt is actually an emergent property, which actually, if you have questions about it, please ask, but I'll try to explain this as simple as possible. The gestalt is an emergent property, which basically means that it consists of parts, but we don't know the parts anymore.
Yeah.
So, for example, let me give you a very physics example, like water. H2O. Water, as we know it, consists of H2 molecules and O2 molecules. But these two molecules are gases. And when you think about it, it actually blows your mind when you think about it. No, I'm looking at water. No, these are two gases. No, that couldn't be. Well, water is the emergent property that emerges when you put two gases together under the right circumstances. And you would never guess that they are made from gases. Yeah? But we know because we understand physics. But depression is also, I believe all our important states are gestalt states. They emerge from several different feelings coming together, but we don't know those feelings anymore because we just get engulfed in the end state, which is this black, heavy, meaningless, no future, loneliness kind of state that we're in. So this is not an active process a person does. This is actually how physics works, and also within our neurology. Suddenly something shifts. If you put something under the right conditions together, you get this shift, and a new state emerges. So in working with this new state, we want to actually kind of, if I would say very strangely, we want to demolish the gestalt. We want to get all the real parts out of there, so that a new gestalt can emerge, so that we can actually build a new gestalt.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was thinking when I did my research, I also did the research on the opposite of depression with my clients and all these groups. Because I thought, well, if I want to work with depressed clients, or at least make a chance, I need to have some kind of an outcome. I need to have an outcome that at least we know what we're aiming for. And again, this is also in the book, how you actually can get to that. But one of the things that I found is that one of the core outcomes of depression is actually zest for life. And zest for life is the gestalt where a person experiences the desire to live and to keep on living. That's what zest for life means. The desire to live and to keep on living. So then I had to figure out, how do I dismantle this gestalt and build this gestalt within the inner landscape of the person I'm working with? And that emerged as I was going on.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting, a thought triggered when you were talking about the gestalt or the gestalt of depression, and it reminded me of a client I was working with who had anxiety and depression, and couldn't leave his house, etc. And when we were unpacking the last episode of whatever had happened, this person had said, it was triggered by something that somebody said or did or whatever. And then, as it turned out, when we unpacked it, they said that they were actually irritated by what had happened.
Yeah.
And they had become unconscious to the fact that they were actually irritated. What it actually, and so they had just put this overarching thing of anxiety and depression, when really what they were feeling was irritated. When we sort of literally took it apart, and I said, okay, so you were irritated.
Yeah.
And this person was shocked that that's actually what the emotion was, but it was because of this overarching definitions that he gave stuff.
Yeah.
That's emerged.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's such an intense, engulfed state, and one of the core elements, I would say, of the Gestalt is this sense of desperation that emerges within the Gestalt. And desperation in the sense, I don't know what to do about it, but nobody else knows what to do about it. So there is this desire to move, but there, at the same time, there's also this desperation. And so this desperation actually feeds the depression as well. It's like, who's going to save me here? And that's very often the case. I ever since I published my book in Dutch first in 2016, in 2019 I published it in English. But ever since 2016, a lot of my clients actually with depression have become a lot younger. So a lot of parents actually call me and say, listen, my son or daughter is in college, lives in dormitories somewhere or in rooms, but they're depressed, and he hasn't come out of his room for a year. He only plays Nintendo or something, So, and one of the things, but they say, but they don't want to join me to meet somebody. And for me, it's logical, because if you're in despair and nobody can help you, and you feel that you can't be helped, why would you get out of your room? So I always suggest, well, listen, put them in the car, deliver them to my doorstep. I have a cup of coffee with them, and then after that, they can decide if they want it or not. Because they don't have this sense of that something can change.
There's another thing when we again talk about the physiology. We have a physiology of depression as well. And when we talk about of emotions, like, our physiology will influence the emotional states that we're inhabiting. And often with the young people today, as you were saying, staying in a dark room, playing Nintendo all day, it's very much they are in that sort of looking on. People are on their phones all the time. We're all looking down here. We're all hunched over, looking down into, onto screens. And often in that space is where the physiology of depression exists. That sense of looking down, hunched over, and so our habits are also creating emotional states that trigger what we, give definition to as depression.
Interesting. I don't completely agree. Let me explain. Okay. I can completely concur that this physiology actually matches the physiology of when you're down and somber and stuff. But it's my experience that physiology only resonates within the person if the person already knows the feeling from the past. Then again, we can also have life experiences where, let's say, you're married for 20 years, your partner dies, and your kids move out, and you are lonely. And then your house is on fire, you have a huge setback. and then you don't have money to recover anymore, and then your self-image changes from, oh, I was this woman who took everything by the hand, and now I can't do anything anymore. So you can also have these instances in later life. However, most of these causes refer to something in the past.
What about with young people then?
Depression.
It's a high level incidence of depression and anxiety amongst the youth today,
Yes.
amongst teenagers, and
Well, I find that's actually not my area of expertise, I must say. I do know. Obviously, I do know something about it. But interestingly, just this morning, I talked to a woman. Just to give you an example, she's doing really well. I worked with her a couple of times, and then she said, "Well, I'm feeling so well right now, but actually, a new fear has come up that I've been having for the last 2 weeks." And so I said, "Tell me about it." And she said, "Well, listen, I have what's called a clinical winter depression." So I said, "Okay, interesting." So, which basically means that when winter starts and the days get shorter, she has this experience of relapsing into depression. And she said, "Well, no, it's actually diagnosed." And so I said to her, "So when was this diagnosed?" She said, "Well, when I was 9. So something that was interesting, and actually I worked with her on this, and she actually, her, let's say, early memories of the same feelings when we start talking were about living on a farm, completely isolated, without any support from her parents, having to cycle on a bicycle 15 kilometers in rough Dutch weather in the winter to school every day at 9, just imagine, and completely feeling lonely and deserted. And she was exhausted when she got home every day. And after some years, they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, these are exactly the symptoms of winter depression." So again, also with young children or children, I would really try to figure out, what are you actually experiencing? What does this refer to? What do these feelings refer to? And the younger they are, the more difficulty they have in verbalizing it, of course. But with young people, I work with some young people, you can actually work directly with the inner landscape. Because loneliness, they understand. She felt lonely. She understands. She understands that she doesn't feel support. And I can actually help her have that feeling of support.
So I want to ask you about the inner landscape, but before we do, because I want to then switch gears to, well, where do we move with this? One of the things that a lot of people will say is that, okay, well, I have clinical depression and it runs in our family.
Yes.
So it's sort of like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm genetically prone to depression.
Interesting. Well, I've got a very short answer. There's very little evidence that there's a genetic connection. It's been called for many years, but if you look at all the real research, there's very little evidence. However, there are instances that there is genetic prevalence.
What about things like unconscious modeling? Because children model their parents and their environment in terms of how to deal with challenges. And when they see their parents dealing with situations in a certain way, and they unconsciously model it, they're going to have similar kinds of emotions. And, it's like creating this sort of a massive gestalt in a way. Well,
I think most of our, let's say, issues are learned issues.
Yes.
So when it runs in the family, you learn that the whole family feels depressed. So that makes it a very inescapable outcome. So of course, and it makes it, when you work with a client like that, even just a bit more challenging, because that person not only has to believe that something can be done about it, but that it can escape the whole family experience. Which is something that could be challenging when you work with a client like that. But in essence, I think that all our feelings, that's too much. Let's say most of our feelings that are really important to us, we learn within our family system. And we learn them by how our parents behave, how our brothers behave, our sisters, how we are accepted at schools by aunts and uncles and grandfathers and grandmothers, by all the things that all these people do, but also by all the things that they do not do. Because what a person doesn't do when he needs to do it also impacts how we feel. Yeah. So with this girl being on the bike, she needed her father to ride with her on the bike. You understand? But he didn't.
Yeah.
So all these and you gotta imagine these are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, maybe billions of experiences, very subtle ones that influences how we feel.
Yeah.
And how we feel we use as a template for how we think about the future.
Yeah. The expectations we have. Now, I will encourage people. We do have actually quite a few people watching, which is exciting. If you have any questions you'd like to ask to be a part of the conversation, please do put them. I'm reading what people are writing as Vasily and I are speaking. But if you have any questions, please do ask. We'd love to sort of engage that into our conversation, which would be amazing. But while I wait for people to sort of ask questions, we've got a lot of people watching, Vasily, so it's really great. Let's shift it. So like we depression, as you were saying, that it's so over-encompassing often, and there's no sort of sense of, well, what else instead?
Yes.
And as you said, zest for life, and and also sort of the other side of it, and also what can people do to help themselves in moments of when they are feeling what they identify as depression or depressive episodes?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think, and again, that's one of the things that I've written down in this book, is I actually write down how does a depression come about, what actually happens, because that alone gives a lot of people understanding, that this is going on, and there's so much recognition from my clients. But there's not one thing that a person needs to do, because there are a couple of things, because it's a gestalt, it needs, and it's a complex issue. But there are some things that are really relevant. Just for everybody to know, in the book, I actually guide people through processes for loneliness and changing self-image and dealing with setback and all that kind of stuff. So there are actual processes in there that therapists and coaches can use, but also individuals can actually go and get, get in their system. But it's actually a great guide for coaches and therapists and people who want to work with it.
Yeah, and it's available on Amazon where people can buy it.
Yes. So one of the interesting things, I'm just going to give you one example of what you could do actually. One of the interesting things with a depression is that if you have this sense of setback, like things that work against you, what could actually happen is that if you look at it at a deeper level, and I've had quite a few clients just literally say that to me at a certain stage, at a deeper level, you can get the sense of that you're not having any luck anymore. And the interesting thing is, when I heard that the first time, the client say something really triggered inside of me, because I use this sentence, happiness is depressing, for a very good reason, because actually this is what a depressed person experiences. So I wanted to describe the experience from the inner landscape out. But the interesting thing with happiness, if you define happiness, happiness is actually is a fork with two roads, because one road leads to this continuous state of contentment, which is in our everyday talk about happiness. I want to feel content and so on, which is a magical state that somehow needs to appear. But the other fork of happiness is the sensation and experience of luck. Let me give you an example. Let's say you walk on the street and you find $10 in the street, and you kind of go, "Wow, lucky me,"
And $1, and you're like, "Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah, we all know.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, so But you could also have that, you know, like you've been buying shoes you've been wanting for a long time, but they're too expensive, and then you walk into a shop and there's a sale, and suddenly they're half price. You gotta go, whoa, am I lucky? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the interesting thing with luck is that it's the experience of unexpected good fortune.
Mm.
When I was working with depressed clients, I noticed that all of them lost their sense of good fortune. So I thought, what can I do to create this inner landscape where there's this feeling emerges from that this fortune will happen again? Because think about it. I don't know how many people are interested in NLP who are listening at the moment, but one of the interesting things, and you will definitely recognize this, you know, when you lose your sense of fortune, something good is going to happen, and you also only have the sense of setback, then your future perspective is quite grim and dark. Yeah. But if you create this experience of the expectation of good things about to happen, that actually opens up something in the inner landscape. It actually changes something in the inner landscape, would actually create some kind of future perspective that got lost, which is part of the depression gestalt. Mm. So what I would advise everybody listening, which is a great exercise to do, and different from many other things that, you know, self-help books advise, I would actually sit down and write down all your good fortune experiences. Mm. Just each and every one. Go back to your whole life and remember, when were you really lucky? And just write down one after the other. Oh, I was really lucky. I got into that school that I didn't think was going to happen, you know? Mm. So, but this is just luck that happens. So this is one form of luck. But the second form of luck you really want to be focused on is unexpected and luck within social circumstances. So, for example, when you look back in hindsight, you know, you go to a congress, you meet some nice people, and in hindsight, you talk to one person, and that person actually brought you in contact with somebody, and that person has changed your life completely, you know, which is like good fortune looking back. Yeah. So we all have many of those experiences as well, that you kind of go, wow, that happened to me. You know, so you have good fortune that happens in the moment. You find something, you get a discount. Wow, am I a lucky person? And you have good fortune where you look back in hindsight. Oh, I'm so glad I met this woman. For example, I'm so glad I met you in Athens because now I'm here.
Me too. That was the same thing. I was so lucky. I was going to say.
You understand? You understand? So you got to go, wow, am I a lucky person? Yeah. So you want to write down those experiences as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And the third thing you can actually make a habit from is something that's really valuable to do. The other ones are really valuable as well. But the third one is really valuable as well. What you want to do is you want to look at your bad luck experiences through your life and look at what good has come out of them. Mm. So, for example, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and a couple of years ago, she was much younger. I was walking her to school. The school is not far from here. There was a car parked, and we were crossing. But we couldn't see the traffic because there was a car parked here. Mm-hmm. And she suddenly started running, and out of nowhere, a car came behind the car, and luckily for her and for us, the car immediately stopped. And I was like, oh my goodness, you know, my heart not stopped, but as a matter of fact,
yeah, metaphorically, yeah.
And I was like, and ever since, you know, I was focusing on, wow, am I a lucky guy? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me give you another example. I was riding with my old car, and my ex-girlfriend was driving in my older car that I gave to her. She was driving in front of me, 100 meters in front of me, and then suddenly I was looking at her exhaust pipe, and it looked like it was wobbling. So I was trying to signal her like something's wrong, and then suddenly the exhaust pipe came off. And we were doing 120 kilometers an hour. The thing came off, it bounced off. I was in the other lane, but it bounced off. And instead of going straight, it just bounced to the left to me. And it just went, it went, the whole metal thing, this is a huge metal thing, and it went just this much over my roof. In my, you know, like where I was sitting. And I was like, ever since, am I a lucky guy? All right. So you have all these bad luck experiences that you actually want to write down. What is the good luck side from that? And as an exercise, you want to read all these experiences regularly. I was really lucky with that. I was unexpectedly lucky in hindsight with that. And all these good things have come from bad luck. You know, the thing about it is, you know, it's a cliche, but it's really true. When some people, you know, are in the dying bed of a serious disease, and they're dying way too young, and then they suddenly say, now I understand what life really means. I feel so blessed. And that is actually the perspective of focusing in on the good fortune something really detrimental can bring you.
Yeah.
And having those experiences going around in your mind, in the book actually I describe how you can actually put that in your inner landscape. But having these experiences going around in your mind can actually already change your mindset and your inner landscape.
Absolutely. And and I don't know if this is accurate, and I'd love your feedback. Wonder if along with luck, one can also maybe use the word gratitude. So in terms of, but what I mean by that is, so for me, I was in a very dark period of my life, deeply unhappy, and it would be defined as depression. No hope, so totally hopeless. And it was that period, and I don't want to bore you with the details of it, that enabled me to get into NLP, actually, because I'd never heard of it until then, you know, coaching in NLP. And it was that period that enabled me to live the life I live today, that enabled me to have the quality, I'm living a life way beyond what I dreamed I was capable of. Meeting amazing people like yourself and others in the NLP field, and just making a mark that I never ever thought I was capable of. And I'm so today, many, you know, well over a decade later, I'm so grateful for that period. And to me, that was luck, because if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't experience the quality of life and experience that I'm experiencing today. I would have just hummed along at the level that I was living at, because it was good enough.
Yes.
And to me, so I use the word gratitude, but to me, it was luck that I was in such a dark place that I had to do something.
Exactly.
And that brought greatest luck.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing is,
luck in many ways.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, I would say gratitude is the reflection of the luck that you've had, on the luck that you've had.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's a consequence. But to actually change the state, I would go for luck.
Yeah.
And gratitude is fantastic, of course.
Yeah. Vasily, I have taken up so much more of your time. We have a lot of people. There aren't any questions, but there are a lot of people listening. So if anybody would like to ask questions or ask Vasily something, let me just go through and just see if there are any questions, if I've missed them by any chance.
Or just give some feedback on what you think.
Yeah, we'd love some feedback from people and on their thoughts, their takeaways, their comments. Because I had actually sorry, Vasily, I had actually told Vasily, look, think about it as about half an hour.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for the generosity of your time and sharing so much. Now, this book that you're talking about is available on Amazon.
Amazon, yes.
And anybody can order it from there. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. I ordered mine as well.
Oh, fantastic.
And I have to say, the masterclass of yours that I attended, and I was riveted by it. I have used and reused all that you spoke about in that masterclass
Really
on
fantastic.
working with people with depression or negative
Yeah.
emotional states or whatever. I've used it so much, and the transformation and the change people have experienced, and just the moment they, and you know, using the word just, but the moment people start experiencing things in a different perspective, the emotional space changes for them, their definitions change, and their feelings change. And so the ability to create change has been pretty fast as well. Suddenly they have resources, and it's not like they are no longer held hostage to that sense that this is who I am. And thus, as you're saying, you know, that they project it forward and this is how it will always be. Suddenly, like there is hope, as you were saying, of a different future, of a different reality that is just within their grasp. That's what I love the most, and that's what I love most about NLP. It gives one that.
Well, first of all, I find it really inspiring that it has given you so much to have this masterclass, and that there's so much you've taken away from it, and that you can forward that to your clients as well. It's one of the things that my experience, I work with a lot of clients, and one of the things that I see is that and I'm not focusing on the speed, but the actual rate of change and the amount of time it takes is so relatively short if you compare it to other intervention methods.
Yes, exactly.
And that's so encouraging for people experiencing depression, and also what we can actually do with these problems. So I'm hoping we can set up something like that in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Lots and lots of opportunities for collaboration. I've got ever since we met, I've just got all of these ideas, and we'll, start rolling them out, and, do it in a way that, people are also connected. Now, Abbas has written questions. So Abbas, it's not possible to bring you into the conversation, like to put you live. If you could type your conversation, your question, then I can ask Vasily the question. So if anybody has questions, if you can type it in or give your thoughts, or, if you just want to share your thoughts from our conversation, that would be fantastic. If you have a question, just type it. I just sort of very quickly go through. Sadia says, Sadia, there's this lovely lady called Sadia. She's saying hello. She's a real trailblazer. So there are people from around the world, Vasily, who are watching, which is exciting. It's not just from your country or mine.
Okay.
So it is very nice. Okay, I'm not really sure about the conversation, the question that Abbas is asking. So I think I'm going to, where's a question? There's a question he asked. Here's a question. Will he be able or willing to work with our center? Well, we'll just see about that, Abbas. There's some sort of conflicts of interest that could arise. So we just please share the link with him, whatever. We can talk about that. we can talk about that.
You figure those things out.
Exactly.
But if people have any questions or want to learn more, they can also go to my site, the English website of vasilisafidis.nl/en. Just Google my name, you will find my site. Go to the English pages. There's quite a few blogs on depression and happiness. There's a couple of pages on training related to depression and masterclass and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to learn more, and there's some videos there, so please visit my site and contact me if you have anything you would like to know.
Absolutely, and Vasily, you also run trainings on teaching people how to use your method with depression as well, and so people can find out about that. You also do trainings on working with relationships. There's a lot that and so people can actually access your website and connect into into those trainings as well. And as per conversations we've had, we're looking forward to hosting you in Pakistan, which would be exciting, and also creating
really
either online or in the room trainings that people can connect into, which would be super exciting, because it's much needed. And just to sort of finish it off in terms of what you were saying, the levels of depression right now are a lot higher than, say, a year ago, because we've been going through for such a long period with COVID. There's a sense of loss of hope for, because people feel like it's just never going to end. And things end. And I think part of it is what you were talking about, luck. And it's important to remind ourselves of the small bits of luck that we have every day, or in our lives, that we delete because we're kind of in that overriding space. So Vasily, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and your effort and your generosity of sharing. And for people who want to buy Vasily's book, we're going to put a link on in the chat, or I'll put it in an edit in the next to the video, and also your website and all of that. Maybe you can just add your website there as well.
Yes, of course.
And we can access you there as well.
Yeah, but it was lovely talking to you, and and again, this was an hour, so it took a lot more of my time. I'm really angry. Because I can talk for hours, so there's a lot more to learn. In this company, and there's so much depth to this. And as I said in the beginning, one of the things that I've really learned about from depression is to get a sense, also in my own life and with my loved ones and everyone, is what happiness actually means, and how you can actually go for the happiness that really fits who we are as human beings, instead of the desired happiness that we tend to long for. So I wish you all lots of luck, and and I hope to see you soon in the future.
Absolutely, Vasily, and may luck and good fortune shine on you as well.
Lovely.
Great speaking to you. Speak to you soon. Bye.